especially with all the weather, the wind. So my name is Tyler Hudak. Most people, I think, know me as Denise's husband. But I'm here to talk about internet safety, internet security, and how the things that you can do to protect yourself and your children while you're on the internet or on computers. Cool. So a little bit about me. There's my contact information. If you didn't get the handouts, there's a bunch of handouts out there. Everything that I talk about, all the software that I talk about, all the links that I talk about are on that, so you don't have to worry about rushing to write them down and so on. That's my email address. After this, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, questions or comments, or you want to know if something is good or bad or what. I'll try to answer them the best I can, but that's how you get a hold of me. So a little bit about me. I've been working in IT for about 20 years now. A little bit over 16 of those have been in information security. My wife says that I'm a hacker, and that's pretty much what I do for a living. I work for a company called CoreLogic Security. We're a really small consulting company, and we get paid by other companies to break into their networks. We'll break into their computers, we'll break into their networks through any means possible, whether that's through hacking directly into their systems, hacking into their users, sending phishing emails and getting them to click on the links and get compromised by our software and so on. So by doing this, I get a unique perspective of seeing how the bad guys work, because the techniques that we use are the techniques that the bad guys use. In fact, the techniques that we use tend to be a little bit more harsh than what the bad guys use, because we want the companies that we go against to be a little bit more prepared, because the bad guys aren't going to be as mean, I guess, as we are. In addition to that, I also work on the defensive side. So one of my specialties is doing computer forensics and incident response. So when companies get hacked, we get called in to kind of clean up the mess, figure out what happened, how the bad guys got in, what they took, and so on. So I get a really interesting perspective as to how the bad guys are doing their work, because I work on the offensive side, but then I also get to see exactly what they're doing and how they're getting into the systems, because I work on the defensive side as well. In addition to this, I'm also a parent here at LCCS. I've got 2 daughters. One is a sophomore, one is in 6th grade, and they've both been on computers since probably before they could walk. So there have definitely been some growing pains that we've gone through and difficulties that we've gone through by having them be on the computers so much since they were so young. So hopefully some of that knowledge is coming through here as well. The presentation is kind of split up into 2 different sections. First, I'm going to talk about attackers on the internet, how they work, and what you can do to protect yourself while you're on the internet. And then I'm going to kind of switch gears and talk about social networking and some of the things around that. Obviously, if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end for questions, but if you have any questions before then, just let me know and I'll do my best to answer. So, my pointer will work. There you go. So I'm going to state that everybody here has been a victim of some type of online crime. I have no proof of this. I didn't go and start researching everybody who could potentially be here. But given everything that's happened within the last couple of years and stuff that I'm sure we're going to start hearing about within the next 6 months, especially after Christmas, because I can guarantee probably starting about March or April, we're going to start hearing about all these companies who were hacked during the Christmas time, and they didn't know about it. But if you look at everything that's been going on, there's Home Depot, Target, JP Morgan, Chase have released notifications that they've been hacked. There are viruses all over the place. I don't even know what the statistic is anymore, but there's usually, whenever you go to an antivirus company's website, they like to throw all these stats at you that say something along the lines of there's a couple 100,000 new malware that comes out every day. And that's actually pretty accurate, because it's very easy to create a computer virus to compromise somebody's computer. There's hackers out there. There's the traditional hackers that you probably think of that are the teenagers in their parents' basement somewhere that are just trying to break into a website to throw their name out there. But there's also hackers that are employed by nation states or by organized crime, and that's their job. Their job is to make money hacking, and we'll talk about some of the ways that they actually do that. And then there's finally identity theft. There's a lot of identity theft going on. In fact, that's probably one of the main ways that attackers will make money, by stealing your financial information, stealing your credentials. Sometimes that turns into identity theft, and sometimes it doesn't. But like I said, I'm willing to bet that most people in here have been a victim of online crime, even if they don't realize it. I would say that I take pretty good precautions to make sure that our financial data is safe, but we've had our credit card stolen at least 2 or 3 times online, despite all the precautions we take. So it can happen to anybody. And like I said, I'm willing to bet that most of the, maybe not most of, but a number of the places that you go shopping at during this holiday season have already been hacked. So there's not really much you can do about that, but we're going to talk more about things that what you can do to, when you're going to these websites and when you're going to these online sites, what you can do to protect yourself and at least make it a little bit more harder for the bad guys to get at you. Because if it's harder for them to get at you, they're just going to move on and move to the next person who isn't as difficult to get at. Hopefully I'm not making this sound really pessimistic, because it's really not that bad, but it's just a kind of a fact of life now. So first thing I'm going to talk about is malware, or computer viruses. These are programs that are going to use your computer for some type of malicious intent. No matter what anybody says, there are computer viruses for every single device out there. There's computer viruses for Windows, and Windows is the most popular operating system that is out there, so that's what's going to be targeted the most. And it's been around for pretty much the longest, at least for users, and so that's why we see the majority of malware for Windows. But there's also malware for Macs and iPhones. There's malware for Android devices. Any operating system, any device that you have, there is malware out there somewhere for it. It may be less likely that you're going to get it, but it's out there. So you want to take precautions no matter what type of device you have to protect yourself from this type of stuff. And the purpose of malware, like I said, is to make money for the attacker. 10, 15 years ago, malware was just kind of a nuisance thing. It's rolled into a way that the attackers make a living. And some of the ways that they do that are, first off, malware will send out spam. They'll get onto the computer viruses will get onto your computer, they'll start sending out spam to everybody, and the attackers make money through that by waiting for people to click on the links in the spam, and they get a couple cents per click, but it's still profitable enough that if they compromise 300 computers and send out a couple million emails, they're going to get enough money that to make it worthwhile. Malware is going to provide access to your system and to your files. So when a computer virus gets onto your computer, there's going to be ways for the attacker to get into your computer and look at your files, look at your desktop, take screenshots of what you're doing. If you have a webcam, look at your webcam, turn on your microphone. Basically anything that you can do while you're sitting in front of the computer, an attacker can do with a computer virus that's on your system. They can download, excuse me, a lot of computer viruses will download more malware onto your system. There are some whose sole purpose is to, once they get onto your system, they download like 3 or 4 more viruses on there. And it's just a way for the bad guys to get more and more things onto your system. And usually that's when you start realizing that something's wrong, is because you start seeing pop-ups and your computer gets slow, your internet gets slow, and that's when all the computer viruses are starting to download onto your system. They steal financial information. So some malware, its sole purpose is to get on there, watch for you to log into PayPal or your bank, and steal those credentials and send them out to the bad guy, or even just wait until you go to a site like Amazon and kind of modify the web page, the underlying web page, so that when you click on you're going to buy something, it actually puts something else into your shopping cart. Or if you transfer money via PayPal, it actually transfers a little bit extra to some other account, or something along those lines. This definitely will get on there to steal your credentials. Usernames and passwords are gold in the internet underground markets. They typically don't sell for very much. I mean, when you look at it, they'll probably sell for about 30 to 40 cents a person, but they're usually sold in batches of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And you can do a lot with somebody's credentials. Because like we'll talk about, most people, they use the same credentials or same username and password for every single site that they have. So if I get, let's say, your Yahoo account, your Yahoo email credentials, there's probably a pretty good chance that you use those same credentials for eBay or for PayPal or for your bank. And if I can figure out where else you shop, then I can get in there and do all sorts of nasty things. And then finally, a lot of what attackers will do is when they get hold of your computer and they get their malware onto your computer, they'll actually rent out your computer to other hackers to do everything that we talked about above. They run it out for a couple $100s an hour. I could probably go out and run about 10 to 20,000 machines for about $100 for an hour to do whatever I want on those machines. And usually that's when things are sending out spam or collecting information off your system and so on. But like I said, everything that all this malware, all of the things that the bad guys are doing once they get onto your system is to make money. It's all a business now. And so what you need to do is make sure that you can prevent this from happening so that you're disrupting them and making it more difficult for them to make money. And again, they'll start moving on to somebody else, hopefully. So there are a couple different types of malware that I just or at least techniques that malware will do that have become popular within the last year or so. The first is called ransomware. So hopefully nobody has seen this, this screen. If you see this screen or something very similar to this, you're in for a world of hurt, is what it comes down to. Ransomware is malware which will get onto your system and it starts going through and encrypting your files. And the only way to get those files back is to pay the ransom. And usually what will happen is they'll give you a link, you go up there, you pay $500 to $1,000 to get a program that they give you to decrypt all of your files. The guys who are doing this used to be where the guys who were doing this, the ransomware that they wrote wasn't very good. You could get around it, you could recover the files, but now within the last 3 or 4 months, they finally figured out the right way to do it. And so if you get one of these on your system, you really have to hope that you have a backup somewhere, or else, unless you're willing to pay the ransom, you are out of luck. Your files are probably gone. And this hits everybody. So I have a friend who I got a call from about a week or two ago who used to work in information security. And he got hit by one of these. And he called me over and we sat down and we went through his system. And we figured out where the malware was and we got the malware off. And of course, that wasn't the only thing on there. There was like 4 or 5 other things on there. But we went through every technique that I know of that I use in computer forensics to recover files, to try to recover those files, and they were gone. And he works as a videographer, and so some of the weddings that he had done, he'd lost all the files for them. So he had to make a decision as to whether or not he was going to pay the $500 to get his files back. I don't know whether he did or not. I don't think he did, but it happens to everybody. And we'll talk a little bit about some techniques that you can use to kind of, if you do get hit by something like this, how you can protect yourself. So that's one of the big things that's going on. Another one is called phishing. Phishing is essentially a way for attackers to trick you into downloading malware or opening up a link in an email and tricking you into giving you giving them your credentials. So this is just one example. I'm sure if you have an email account, which I'm guessing everybody does, that you've seen something similar to this. You get an email from American Express saying that there's a security concern in your American Express account. Please click on this link and we'll get it taken care of. And if you look at the link itself, it looks like it's actually going to americanexpress.com, but if you hover over it, you can kind of see it in the bottom there. Hopefully everybody can see it. It's actually going to a website called finds.net/some garbage characters.html. If you would click on this link, it would either take you to a website that looked like American Express and it would try to get you to log in, and if you logged in, now they have your credentials to log into their website, or it would actually come back and attack you and load malware onto your system. And this is just one way that this occurs. A lot of times as well, the emails will come in and they'll have an attachment on there. I've seen a lot recently that say that they're from UPS, that you have a package coming, please look at this attachment and it'll tell you where it is. And it's a zip file and you open up the zip file and it looks like it's a PDF or something like that, but it's really an executable. That's another way that they get malware onto your systems and compromise your systems. I'll say and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but no company like UPS or your bank or anything legitimate is going to send you an email unless you work for that company that has an attachment on it and asks you to open it up. Nor will they send you an email like this that says, please click on this link to fix this problem. If you do ever get something like this and you're not sure if it's real, close the email, go to that website by typing it in, and then log in that way. If you click on the link, you don't necessarily know if you're going to the right place. I mean, this domain here, this URL, this link, it's pretty obvious that it's not American Express. But like I said, I work on the offensive side. When we do this, and this is what I do when I try to get into a company, this is the first thing we'll try. So let's say I was going to attack Lake Center Christian. I would go out and I'd register a domain lakecenterchristian.net or lakecenterchristian.info, which is probably available. If it's not, I'll figure out some permutation of that that's real, so that when you hover over that link, it looks like it's Lake Center Christian. And you have to be really careful. So if you do get something like this, open up your browser and just type it in manually. Then you'll definitely know where you're going at that point. So one of the last ways that attackers will get onto your system is through the web. It usually works something like this. So you're on the web, you're surfing the web, and you connect to a website that loads up a malicious ad. I'm sure everybody's seen those ads that get loaded on web pages. In order to get those ads, you just go to an ad serving company and you just buy an ad from them. Well, the bad guys will do this. They'll go out and they'll buy an ad and they'll put some type of malicious code in there so that when that ad gets loaded onto somebody's system, it actually redirects them to one of the hackers' websites. And once your browser goes to the hacker's website, they usually start sending some attack code back at you to try to exploit something on your system, like maybe an old version of Flash or an old version of the browser you're using, where they can then load something onto your system. And once that happens, the malware gets downloaded onto your system, the hackers into your system, and they can do whatever they want. There are a lot of ways that we can prevent this from happening, which we'll actually be talking about in a second. Kind of far away from my laptop, there you go. So before I start going on, are there any questions? Am I going at a good pace, too fast? Right, cool. So those are just a couple of the ways that attackers will get onto your system. We could probably spend a couple hours just talking about the different attacks that are out there. And again, with everything that we're going to talk about tonight, we're really only going to be able to talk about, kind of like a brief overview of everything. There's going to be lots of different ways to protect yourself, lots of different things to watch out for. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So now, I kind of hopefully didn't scare you too much, but talked about all the different attacks that are out there. Now we'll talk about how you can protect your computer. So one of the best ways to protect your computer is by updating your software. So software has bugs. They have vulnerabilities in it. They have mistakes that the programmers made when they were creating the software. Hackers use those bugs to get onto your system. There's probably at least 200 or 300 different ways that an attacker can exploit some software if a bug is in there to load their own software or take control of your computer. But fortunately, the way to prevent this from happening is by updating your computer. This is probably the #1 way to stay protected on the internet. It's making sure that your computer's updated, making sure that you're current with all the software that's out there. So when I was writing this, I was actually kind of disappointed. There aren't any websites that I could find or software that you can download that tells you which, that will basically go through and inventory everything on your system and tell you which software packages are out of date. So until somebody sits down and writes those and puts it out there for people to use, I mean, corporations have access to that type of software, but that costs probably a couple $100,000, which we can't afford. But until somebody actually sits down and does that, you have to kind of know what's on your computer and kind of manually update it. But you want to make sure that you're updating everything. I've put some links here, and again, they're on your pamphlet, as to the most common things that are exploited by attackers. These are going to be the most common software that they're going to use to try to get into your system, and that's what you want to make sure that you have updated. First, Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office. If you want to see if you have the latest version, you can go to update.microsoft.com in your browser. If you have a Mac, you can either click on the Apple menu, go to Software Updates, or go into the App Store, and it'll tell you if there are any updates. Apple and mobile devices do a really good job of telling you whether or not you have updates available. PCs, like a Windows desktop, isn't as good. They're still kind of working that way, and probably when Windows 10 comes out, it'll be a little bit better, but until then, you still kind of have to do some of this on your own. Adobe Flash Player and Adobe Reader are definitely two of the highest things that are exploited, because everybody has them, everybody has some type of PDF reader or uses Flash to watch YouTube or whatever animations on websites, and those typically have a lot of vulnerabilities in them. So you want to make sure that those are updated. You can go to get.adobe.com/reader or /flashplayer, and it'll actually tell you whether or not you have the latest version, and it will give you the option to download it. Java, you may or may not have on your computer, but Java is a programming language that's used a lot for web applications. And there are tons of vulnerabilities in Java. So a new version probably comes out every other week for Java, so you definitely want to make sure that you're staying up to date for it. The good thing, though, is you don't have to go out and manually look every single day to see if there's something new. Most of these programs can be configured so that they'll automatically update for you. You can either set them so that it will download the updates and let you know when there's an update available, or it'll just download and update the program for you automatically. And again, you want to make sure everything's updated. Even the stuff that I'm not listing here. If you use a browser other than Internet Explorer, you use something like Firefox or Safari or Google Chrome, you want to make sure that those are updated as well, because there will be vulnerabilities in those. If you download any plugins into those, you want to make sure that those are updated as well, and so on. So the next thing is antivirus. Antivirus software is definitely a huge thing that you want to have. I'll say too, all of the software that I recommend here is free. I'm very big on using free software. I'm not really big on going up to Best Buy and paying $60 or $70 for a software package that I'm going to have to renew in a year. So all the software that I recommend here is free, and I've used it. So I'll just throw that out there. But antivirus its purpose is to detect and prevent malware from getting on your systems. Now, antivirus doesn't have a very good reputation in the security world for a good reason. It's not 100% effective. There are ways around antivirus. And so you don't want to rely upon antivirus as your sole means of protection. If you have antivirus on your computer, that doesn't mean that you're 100% protected. It's just one more layer that the bad guys are going to have to get through. But like with everything else, you want to make sure that your antivirus is updating. Usually you can go into the antivirus program and configure how often it updates. You want to make sure that it's updating daily, if not every 4 hours or something like that, because the antivirus updates do come out that quickly. Again, there are a couple 100,000 new malware that are discovered every day. You want to make sure you have those updates so those new attacks and those new viruses can't get onto your system. And then you can also configure the antivirus to do a complete scan of your computer, and usually you'd want to probably do that weekly. And by doing that, it's just going to go through your entire computer and scan it for any viruses that may have gotten through its defenses. Most of the time you won't find anything, or the stuff that it does find are really minor. There's things that are called something like tracking cookies or something like that, which really don't affect you too much. But you still want to have it running weekly just to make sure that your computer is safe and your computer's clean. The three that I would recommend, the first one is called AVG. There's another one called Malwarebytes, and then there's a third one called Avira. These are all free. The thing I'll say is Malwarebytes, it's not written like a traditional antivirus where it's not running all the time in the background. AVG and Avira will have that. Malwarebytes is usually something where you run it occasionally, and it will tell you whether or not you have something on your computer. So I would probably recommend installing AVG or Avira and then having Malwarebytes there just in case. You run it every so often, because having more than one thing looking at your computer is never bad. So one of the things that I was asked to make sure that I talked about tonight is web filtering. Well, excuse me, web filtering is software that's going to monitor your internet usage to see where you're going and then block certain websites based off of certain categories. The web filtering software will go, these companies go through and they categorize pretty much every website that they see into whether, let's say, there's sports or shopping or health and so on. They usually have about 20 or 30 different categories. And then once you install that software, you can go in and you can block certain categories, you can allow certain categories. Some of them even get as advanced as you can allow them for these hours of the day, and then everything else you can block them. They're really good for if you want an easy way to prevent your kids from surfing the web after a certain hour at night. You just set it so that everything is blocked after 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. or something like that. There are lots of different software out there that will do this for you, and again, the ones that I have up here are free, but check with your ISP or whoever makes the router that you have, because a lot of times they will offer, they already have these capabilities built in, or they offer free software for you that will do this as well. Because it's actually advantageous for them to kind of block some of this stuff, because then there's less traffic going over their network. So the one that I've used most in the past is called K9 Web Protection. This is a piece of software that you install on your systems. It actually will run on Windows, Mac, iOS, so iPods, iPads, things along those lines. And you get on there, you have a master password that you get on there and you configure and block whatever categories you want. The nice thing about these all these software packages too is when somebody tries to go to a website that you don't want them to go to, they know it. There's a little big error message that comes up that says, this website so-and-so has been blocked because this category has been blocked. Plus, you can go in there later and kind of run a report to see what websites were blocked, which ones were allowed, when it happened, and so on. So one thing I want to throw out there as well, if you do install one of these, just because some websites are being blocked doesn't necessarily mean that your kids or somebody else in the house were actively going to them. When you go to any website, it's going to load up probably 20 or 30 other websites in the background and load data from them. Sometimes those websites are categorized as something nice, and sometimes they're not. And if you're blocking some of those not so nice categories, these things could be inadvertently being blocked in the background without the person who's going to some other website knowing about it. I just don't want anybody to, throttle their children because they think they're going to all these websites that they really didn't know that they were going to. But K9 Web Protection's one. OpenDNS is a little bit different. It's actually it's a service online, and what it does is you go in there and you configure the DNS settings on your computer or in your router. If you don't know, DNS is essentially the phone lookup system of the internet. So on the internet, everything has what's called an IP address, and this is kind of like their phone number. There's every system on the internet has its own unique IP address. Well, nobody remembers IP addresses. We all remember like www.google.com. And DNS is what translates the www.google.com to the IP address. Well, what OpenDNS is a free online DNS service where you basically say, I want my DNS servers to be OpenDNS, and they'll monitor all the traffic, all the DNS lookups that are happening from your systems. So if you try to look up www.google.com and see what IP address it's at so you can go to it, they're going to see that. And they've actually gone through and they've categorized all these different web servers, and so you can block it that way. The advantage of using OpenDNS over something like K9 Web Protection or the Microsoft Family Safety is that with the other two, with K9 and with Microsoft Family Safety, you have to actually install that software on those systems. If you don't have that software on those systems, the web traffic or the websites are not going to be filtered. With OpenDNS, if you configure it like, let's say at your internet router that your ISP will give you or that you put in to protect yourself, or like if you have a wireless network where your wireless comes from, If you configure that to point to OpenDNS, anything that gets on your network, whether it's somebody visiting, any new device that somebody brings into your house, is going to be filtered. So you don't have to worry about somebody bypassing your filtering just because they don't have that software on their systems. And finally, there's Microsoft Family Safety. This is something that's actually built into Windows 7 and Windows 8. It's something you can turn on, and it does a lot of things that are very similar to the way that K9 Web Protection works. You can go in there, you can turn on parental controls, you can turn on different types of categorization for websites, and it will block those categories if you want them to. So that's web filtering. Passwords are huge on the internet. If an attacker gets your password, then they pretty much have everything. And again, the problem is because most people use the same passwords or very similar passwords on every single site that they have. And let's face it, it's with good reason. If you have 30 different websites that you constantly access, your banking site, eBay, PayPal, Facebook, everything that's out there, you don't want to have to remember 30 different passwords, and so they're going to be very similar. Well, this is great for the bad guys because once they get one of your passwords, they have them all. So here are some kind of recommendations for how to create good passwords, which are going to be harder for the attackers to crack. So I should probably take a step back, actually, and explain, when you sign up for a website, hopefully if the website's doing it properly, when you put in your password, they're actually taking that password and they're encrypting it. They're putting it into a database somewhere and they're encrypting it for you. So that if they do get compromised and the attackers do get onto their systems, they can dump the passwords, but they're all going to be encrypted. And so what the attacker then has to do is go through what's called cracking the password. They have software which will go through and they basically try every different combination of words and letters that are out there to hopefully, and they run it through the same algorithm that the website was using to encrypt it, and hopefully they get the same value out. So they know that if your password's, let's say, password, and they put password through their encryption algorithm and it gets to the same value, they know that they've cracked your password because the value is equal at the end. The stronger you make your initial password, the harder it's going to be for the attackers to kind of crack your password or at least guess what your password is going to be. And these are typically the recommendations that are done. First, you want to try to use passwords, different passwords for every site. It is a pain in the butt to do, but I'll actually talk about some software which makes it a little bit easier on the next slide. But when you choose strong passwords, you want to make sure your passwords are at least 9 characters long. That's kind of the cutoff point for where the cracking the password becomes really, really difficult for the attacker to do. It moves from taking minutes and hours to days and years or lifetimes. So it becomes, that's kind of the point where that happens. You want to make sure you use upper and lowercase in the password. You want to throw in some numbers. You want to throw in some punctuation. If you can, use passphrases, or think of like a sentence or a phrase from your favorite movie or book, and then take like the first letter of each of the words from that phrase and use that as your password. And then don't use repeatable patterns. So what I mean by this is, so on the right-hand side, you can see passwords that are really bad. Happy123 password. Password is actually one of the most common passwords out there, surprisingly. Fluffy96, Browns 2014, or LCCS. These are bad passwords because these would be very easy to crack. I'll say, when we go into a company and we grab their encrypted password database for the entire corporation, one of the first things that we do is we figure out what sports team is in that area, and we run like Browns 2014 or Indians 2014 or Cavs 2014. We'll probably get about 20 to 30% of the passwords just by doing that. So attackers are smart. They're going to try those in the beginning. So some of the good ways to do passwords are, on the left-hand side, the first one is Smelly Cat, where they replace the S with a $sign, the E with a 3, threw in an ampersand in there and put 2 exclamation points at the end. I will say, don't just put an exclamation point at the end of your password and think it's good, because that's the first thing the attackers are going to try, is an exclamation point. That's what everybody does. So throw something else. Put a pound sign or something else there. That'll make it even harder. The second one, I have no clue what that, that's a random one that I just started typing on. That's a legitimate thing to do. If you can remember a 12-character randomized password, then go for it. The third one is a phrase that I was typing up today, and I can't remember what it is. I have no clue what it is. A phrase. I just honestly can't remember what it is. The second to last one is Cleveland is greater than Pittsburgh. If you're a sports fan. And then last one is LCCS is where my kids go to school, with just some upper and lowercase in there and switching out some letters for numbers and symbols and so on. I could probably say the ones on the right-hand side would take a couple seconds to crack. The ones on the left-hand side would at least take a couple hours. And by then, the attackers have probably moved on because they've got a couple 100,000 other passwords that they want to look at, and it's not worth them to keep going. So I said you want to make sure that you use different passwords for different websites. And that's a pain in the butt to do. Because if you have a banking site, if you have PayPal, if you have eBay, and 24 other different websites, it's really difficult to remember 24 different passwords. And so there are programs out there called password safes. And what these password safes do is you put in all your passwords into there, and they encrypt them into a database. And they use really good encryption so that somebody just can't get your database and steal it out. And then anytime you need to remember a password, you just go back into your password safe and pull up that entry, and it'll tell you what that password is. Obviously, you want to put a good password on your password safe, and don't forget your password password, but they're really good. I've actually heard somebody say that these programs save marriages, because now you don't have to start arguing with your spouse. What's the password to PayPal again? I don't know. It's over this. Denise and I do that all the time until we started using one of these. There are two that I would recommend. One's called KeyPass. This is one that I use. It actually, you can use it on Windows, most mobile devices. So there are a number of different operating systems you can use it for. There's another one called Password Safe. I haven't used this one before, but I've looked at it, and it's actually written by a guy who used to do cryptography for the NSA, who's a very well-respected cryptographer. So I trust that one as well. So those are two that you can use to help kind of remember your passwords. And I think you can configure these so that they'll create a randomized password for you, and then there's a way that you can have it run so that whenever you go back to that website, it will automatically put in that password for you. So you can have strong passwords and have this running in the background so you can still get into your websites without a problem. You want to make sure that you're changing default passwords. Devices such as webcams, internet routers, anything that you will go out to the store and buy that's internet connected is going to have a default password on it. Change them. These are well-known passwords. I can go out and download the documentation for whatever device that I find, figure out what the default username and password is, and log on to that website. You may have heard within the last week there was a Russian site that went around the internet and indexed all about 200,000 to 300,000 different webcams that were sitting on the internet that had default passwords on, and you can go to their website and see basically everybody's nanny cams and things like that they had just thrown onto their network, and nobody had changed the passwords on them, so anybody could go in and watch and see what these people were doing. It's pretty common. So you want to make sure that you go in there and you make sure you change your default passwords. You want to make sure that you're backing up all your stuff. We talked about ransomware. Go on there, buy something so that you can back up all your software, all of your documents. Fairly decent external USB drive will cost you less than $100 at Best Buy, or there are a lot of cloud-based services like Dropbox or Google Drive or iCloud, most of which are free, that you can set up to back up your documents to them. So if you do get something like ransomware on your system, then you don't have to worry about it going through and encrypting all of your folders. At least you have a backup somewhere that you'll be able to recover your files from. Now, that being said, for the online services, again, make sure you have a good password for those. If you use an external hard drive, once you're done backing up your files, unplug it from your system. Because if it stays plugged in, the ransomware is going to find it and it's going to encrypt everything, all of your backups, which leaves you in a lurch to begin with. Just some other online security tips. Use common sense. If something seems too good to be true on the web, it probably is. That email saying that you won the lottery is not true. So you just want to be careful and use common sense. Don't click on everything that you see. In that regards, don't open all attachments. These are the biggest ways that computer viruses are going to get onto your system and cause you problems. A lot of online web services now, especially like online services like social media and email, they have something called multi-step verification now. What this means is that the first time you log into that account from a certain computer, it's going to either send you an email or send you a text saying, is this really are you really logging into this? Or it's going to send you a code via text, and you have to enter in that code. This is great because if your password gets compromised and the attacker tries to log into, let's say, your Facebook account from Russia, they're going to get this prompt and you're going to get a text. And if you don't recognize that, they're not going to be able to get into your account, and you're going to know that your password has been compromised and you need to go change your password on your account. These are usually buried somewhere in the settings, but if you have a Gmail account, if you have a Yahoo Mail account, if you have a Facebook account or Twitter account, this is in there. Go in there, set it up so that it can communicate with your cell phone, and it'll just send you a text anytime somebody tries to log in from a new computer. This is going to save you a lot of headaches and make sure that somebody can't just get into your computer, or I'm sorry, into your account if they know your password. Be careful what you install. Don't just download anything from the internet and install it. One of the biggest, there's a statistic at some point that came out that said something like, when you Google free screensaver, that 70% of the links are computer viruses. So if you go out there and you start Googling things like free screensaver, free something, free wallpaper, it's going to lead you to a lot of malicious sites. So you want to be careful if you start doing that, and only download software from reputable sites that you trust. If you have a wireless network at home, make sure that it's encrypted. If for nothing else, that you don't want anybody using your internet connection or somebody sitting outside your house watching all the traffic going by and seeing everything that's going by on your network. In regards to that too, be careful what wireless networks you connect to. Especially if you're in a public place, there are little devices that hackers can buy or build for less than 20 bucks, where they can take this device, configure it to look like a Starbucks wireless network, and they just go and sit down in Starbucks and wait for people to connect to them, and then all your web traffic is going through their systems, and they're stealing all your credentials, modifying your web traffic, and so on. So if you want to really be careful of what wireless connections you're connecting to. Make sure you trust it. Make sure it's something that's legitimate, which admittedly is not always the easiest thing to do. Finally, I didn't really throw this in there because I think most people have this nowadays, but pretty much if you have more than one device on your home network to get to the internet, you have some type of internet router somewhere, which is sitting between the internet connection and your internal network and all the computers on the inside of your network. And usually this is also the device that, if you have a wireless network, is also serving up wireless for everybody in the house. For the most part, if you've bought it within the last couple years, even 5 years, they're actually pretty secure. But you still want to go and you want to make sure that they're okay, that they're not allowing anybody from the internet to get into your network inadvertently, or they've been misconfigured. And one of the ways you can do that is go to the site called Shields Up, and you go there and there's going to be a big screen. You just click on the proceed button, and then it's going to pop up another window, and you just click on something there that says common ports. What it's going to do is it's going to scan your computer from the internet, and it's going to tell you if anything's open. If you find anything open, it usually means you need to go into your router and turn off something or reconfigure it. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to run this, and it's going to say, oh, I can't see you. And if it says that, then you're good. It means that hackers can't scan across the internet, find your computer, and get in. So I understand that was kind of a whirlwind of going through all the different ways that attackers get in, or all the different protections that you have. Are there any questions on this, or am I still going at an okay pace? I know this is a lot of information, and again, we're really only covering kind of the basics up here, and I'm available for anything if anybody has any questions. But now I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about social networking and social media. Social media is something that's I'm sure everybody in here has some type of social media account or have been on a social media site like Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or anything like that. And there are hundreds of social media sites. In fact, when I started doing research, a little bit of research for this presentation, I actually went out and searched and looked for articles which talked about what social media sites teens are going to, because I honestly had no clue. And there were some that came up that I had never heard of before. And the ones that I'm showing up here are only a very small percentage of what's out there. There are new social media sites that come up every single day. And some of these are, pretty popular. So like Facebook is pretty well known, Snapchat, Vine, Steam, these are all pretty popular ones. But then there are ones like Uvu, Chat Roulette, Kick, Omegle, which I had either just briefly heard of or never heard of. And all of these do different things. Some of them are chat systems, some of them allow you to share videos, some of them allow you to connect to other people and kind of chat inadvertently. And all of these different websites and social media sites have their own unique challenges, and they provide their own unique problems for anybody going to it, especially kids. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of talk about a couple different things that you should be aware of about social media, and in turn that can also be applied to your kids and that you should talk to about your children or with your children. Before I get into it too, I will put some links that go to more information on some of these things. There are definitely lots of resources out on the internet, and I'm sure Lake Center has some resources as well about social media and protecting yourself on social media and what to talk about. Again, I'm just kind of covering the basics here. But one thing to be remembered, and one thing that I think a lot of kids don't realize, is that on the internet, there's really no privacy out there. I mean, you can do things to kind of protect yourself and keep yourself private, but there are lots of ways around it. There are lots of ways for people to get around your privacy settings. And so few things on the internet are ever private. And nothing ever disappears on the internet. You may post something, or somebody may post a status update or post a picture, and then 2 minutes later decide they don't want it up there and delete it. But chances are that one of your friends one of their friends have seen it. They may have copied it. They may have taken a screenshot of it. They may have downloaded that image. And even though you or some other person deletes it, that doesn't mean it's gone forever. If an indexing server on the internet, if you don't have your privacy settings set up correctly, comes across it, let's say like Google Images, and they find that image and they download that image, good luck getting it taken away, because it's out in the cloud somewhere, and eventually it's going to come back to haunt you. And a lot of people share more than they realize. They don't go through and look at the privacy settings on their website or for all the different social media sites that they have access to. Facebook's privacy settings probably change every 6 months or so, if not more than that. So you have to go in there and look and see what your privacy settings are, and make sure that the information you want shared is actually being shared, and you're not sharing more than what you realize. This is especially important on things like mobile applications or your phones or tablets, because when you install an application onto your mobile device, it's going to ask for permissions. And you may not realize that some of those permissions give them access to a lot of things. There was actually a really poorly written report that came out a couple weeks ago about how flashlight apps and Android systems were asking for way more permissions than they needed to be. And according to the guy who wrote it, they were stealing all this data and sending it to China. And it was really blown out of proportion, but it's still a legitimate thing to realize. Go into something like your Facebook privacy settings and see what apps or what programs in Facebook have access to your data or your information. You may want to go in there and shut things off. If you've ever gone through something like a BuzzFeed quiz, and you say, go ahead and post the result to my Facebook status, that gets that allows Facebook to get in there and look at your Facebook statuses. Now, they may not do anything with it, but they have the ability to do it. So, do they really need to or not? Just go in there and look at your privacy settings and your children's privacy settings to make sure there's not something in there that shouldn't be in there. One of the big things that you want to make sure that you're being careful of is disclosing your personal information, your location, or even when you're going on vacation online. I see a lot of people saying, hey, we're in this place for vacation, we're posting all these pictures, or we're leaving next week to go on vacation. I don't think a lot of people realize that that's really an invitation to get your house robbed. There used to be a website called robmyhouse.com that would just troll things like Facebook and Twitter, looking for people who were saying, I'm going on vacation, and then they would post it at this website. So you just go to this website, and it was really nice. It would geolocate everybody for you, so you can find their address, find where they live, and go rob their house. It's something small, but you just want to be careful about that. On your phone, especially for your camera and all your social media accounts, turn off location sharing. You may not realize this, but by default on your phones, when you take a picture, it tags it with GPS coordinates within that image. So once you upload that image somewhere, somebody can take those coordinates and figure out exactly where you were when you took that photo. And there are services out there that use this to geolocate people just by images. Turn those off, especially for things like your children, if they have like an iPhone or an iPod Touch or something that has a camera in it, because nobody needs to know where they're at all the time. It's just something to help keep them safe. And again, check the security and privacy settings for all these sites, and check them occasionally, because they'll change as time goes on. So most sites, especially all those social media sites that I mentioned, they all have some type of private messaging system within there. And kids know this. I mean, let's face it, name a kid who doesn't text. I mean, most kids out there have some way that they're going to text. I mean, I'll give you an example. My daughter, my youngest daughter, Nadia, she has a cell phone, but she really doesn't use it to text. Instead, she has a texting app on her iPod that she uses instead. So even though she has a cell phone, she's using her iPod to text and to chat with everybody else. So even if they don't have a cell phone, if they have an iPod, they have a Nintendo DS, if they have some type of gaming system, if they have an internet account on any website, they have the ability to message with other people. And so you want to get in there, and you want to especially make them understand that once you send something out, once you send a text out or a message out, you can't take it back. Somebody's going to see that, and I think a lot of people, including adults, they get online and they see that anonymity of being behind that screen, and they'll say things and they'll post things that they wouldn't say to somebody to their face. And so that becomes a really issue, especially with children. And I'm sure we've all seen this, where somebody sees a kid somewhere post something that's really mean or kind of borders on cyberbullying or something similar to that. And chances are they probably are not really realizing what they're sending out. And I think a lot of kids just need to realize that once they send this out, you can't take it back, and it will come back to hurt you. And honestly, the sooner that everybody realizes that, the better. To kind of give an example, at a company that I used to work for, they started going through everybody's, any potential employees' Twitter feeds or social media feeds if they were made public. And there were some people who did not get hired because of what was in their social media feeds. People, especially kids, need to realize this, that companies are doing this. They're going to make sure that your online personality is what they want in their company. And if it's not what matches up, you may not get that job. So cyberbullying is a big thing right now. I will be the first to admit that I am in no way an expert on this. I know I've talked to some of the teachers here at Lake Center who know a lot more than me, so I'll defer to them as well. But cyberbullying is basically bullying or teasing, demeaning, harassing that happens online just as it does in real life. I've seen a lot of instances of this online, either on my kids' feeds or even just people talking about it. The best thing to do with what all the resources out there are saying is that to talk to your kids about it, that if they see this happening or if it's happening to them, to make sure that they tell a trusted adult, either you or a teacher or something like that, so it can start getting taken care of and fixed. The best thing to do is advise them not to respond, but not to delete the messages either. Because if you do need to go and confront, let's say, a parent about it, to talk to the parent of the child who's doing this, you want to make sure you have that evidence there. Take a screenshot of it, print it out, and go talk to them about it to make sure that they understand that, yes, this really is happening, that their child did send this message, and talk to them why it could potentially be an issue. I highly recommend monitoring your child's online activity, their feeds, their social networking feeds, for any indicators of this. You may not see it happening to your child, but you may see it happen to another child, and that child's parents may not realize that's going on. And so you may need to let them know about it. Or, heaven forbid that you see one of your kid's friends or your kid themselves doing something which could be considered cyberbullying. I mean, at that point, you definitely want to step in and make sure that they realize what they're saying is hurtful, because they probably don't realize that. We talked a little bit about the web filtering, and that can be used to monitor activity online. But you want to make sure that for every device that connects to the internet, that you enable any parenting controls on there. So all the gaming devices that are around, the Xboxes, the PS3s, 4s, Nintendo systems, they all have some type of parenting controls on there that you can go in there and you can enable those to either restrict what they can do, whether you turn off messaging or prevent them from surfing the web or things along those lines. Go in there, turn those on, and that will help at least protect them from some of the things that are going on online. Just so, some other tips for things that can help protect your children when they're online. Put your computers in a public area in the house so that your kid can't go into their bedroom, close the door, and get on their laptop and start surfing the web and doing whatever that you don't know what they're doing. By having that in a public area of the house, it definitely helps curb them from going to sites that they shouldn't be going to, whether on purpose or accidentally, or doing things that they shouldn't be doing. To give an example of this, and I'm probably going to embarrass her for saying this, but when Callista, my oldest, was young, she was probably about 7 or 8, we decided that we were going to let her play World of Warcraft. But she could only play it when she was sitting in my office and I was in there with her, so I was sitting right behind her so I could watch what she was doing. Well, I'm in my office working and she's on the computer playing, and again, she's like 7 or 8, and she's talking to somebody online and says, "Hey, you're cute." And she didn't realize what she was saying. She didn't realize that this is probably some adult somewhere who doesn't realize that he's talking to a 7-year-old kid. And as soon as I saw that, I shut her down. We shut down the computer and we sat there and we talked about why this was not a good thing. What she did was why what she did wasn't a good thing. We wouldn't have never have seen that if we had allowed her to do that in her bedroom and without any supervision. By having that computer in a public area where we were at, we were able to see what was going on. Don't let your children delete their internet history or any messages before you look at them. This is going to help at least them realize that you're watching what they're doing. And again, they may be going to some sites that they may not mean to. Like I said, you go to one site, especially if it's been compromised by an attacker, it's going to redirect you to a bunch of other sites as well. So they may not mean to go to somewhere, but at least by looking through their history, you can see where they're going. And I'm not advocating, spying on your children. Let them know you're doing this. And I'll also say, too, kids are smart. They're going to figure out 50 different ways to get around this. But hopefully, at least you're going to put up, do enough things that it's going to help prevent them from, at least making it be easy. Know your children's passwords. Use one of the software that we talked about, one of the password safes, to go in there and keep their passwords in there so that if you do need to get into one of their accounts to see what they're doing, to look at their messages, to look at their history or what they're posting on their feeds, that you have access to do this. And then monitor all their online accounts or posts. If they're on Facebook, make them connect to you or friend you on that social network, or at least be able to get in there and so know their passwords so you can get in there and see what they're doing. There is software that will do all this for you. I can't recommend any of it though, because first off, I've never used it, and it costs, well, I've never used it, it costs money, and quite honestly, I'm not sure that I trust them well enough to be able to do that. It doesn't take away the responsibility of you being a parent and watching your children's activity online. It's going to help a little bit, but like I said, there's 100 different ways that a kid is going to figure out how to get around that software. And so by you getting on there and doing it yourself, it's at least going to make you knowledgeable as to what they're doing or what they could be doing. If your kids are anything like mine, they want to jump on a new site or download a new app every other day, research that app or that website to make sure that it's something that you want them to be using. And if you do allow them to use it, create their account with them so that they're choosing, they're not just putting necessarily their real birth date in there, or they're setting the right privacy settings, or that the privacy settings are set in there as they should be. Set rules on posting messages, videos, pictures, and so on. Like I said, a lot of these videos and pictures, they geolocate or they tag the information of where they were taking with the GPS coordinates. So if that's not turned off, your kid could be posting where they play in the afternoon or where they go to school online without realizing it. Like I said, monitor their internet history, and finally, go out and Google your child's name and see what comes back. They could be on some websites that you never realized that they were on, or they may have registered for a website once just to get at some software or post something on a message board or get some game code for something and totally forgot that they had an account there. And this is probably one of the most effective ways of doing that, is just searching for your child's name and see what comes back. So, like I said, there are tons of resources online to talk about social media usage, and how you can talk to your kids and so on. These are just some of them. Microsoft and Google have really good sites on it. The FBI has some really good sites, and then there are a couple others that I found pretty useful. So that's what I have. Hopefully, it was informational and useful. I didn't speed through it.